Now, if you would take your note sheet and flip it over, we're going to look at the back. And today, I want you to think about how can you get the variable by itself. Well, if we multiply 1 times c, we get c. Very similar to adding 0, we have multiplying by 1. It keeps the variable by itself. You get the number by itself, which would be c times 1 is c. D times 1 would be d, and of course, r times 1 would just be r. So keep that in mind. If we can create a 1, multiply by the variable, we get the variable by itself. So in the next slide, if I take a number that's multiplied by c and divide it by that same number, you create a 1. And what's 1 times c? c. Any number divided by itself. Here we have r. It's being multiplied by -10. If we divide it by that same number, we get a positive 1. And 1 times r is r. Here we have the variable being divided by 3.4. So if we multiply by 3.4, these cancel out to be 1s, and d times 1 is just d. So here we use the idea of inverse operations. If you look down to one slide, it says here at this arrow, we can use inverse operations to get rid of the other operation. In other words, multiplication is inverse of division, and division is the inverse of multiplication. So back to this slide here, this is just the inverse operations. We're multiplying by 4 and dividing by 4, they cancel out. C's by itself. Same with over here, dividing by 3.4 and multiplying by 3.4, cancel out, you get d by itself. Now in these two problems, we're multiplying by reciprocals. And when you multiply by reciprocals, the numerators and denominators, can simplify to be 1. And 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times n is just n. So anytime you multiply by a reciprocal, you actually get a 1, and 1 times n, or whatever variable it is, would be by itself. So back to this slide here. So another option is, instead of using inverse operations, we can use what we call multiplicative inverses, known as, and we've talked about these before, reciprocals, to create a 1. And when you create a 1 and you multiply by 1, you get a variable that's by itself.